Hello, this is Dr. Greg Parsons, and as you can see, this is going to be a presentation about the prospectus. The prospectus is the first stage of the dissertation process, and thus it's, well, you might call it the first milestone that students achieve when they actually start working on their dissertation. So, it's important to understand and avoid any misunderstandings about the purpose or the process with regard to developing a prospectus. It provides the foundation for all the work that comes afterwards. Now, our poor student here is at point ABD, which stands for all but dissertation. And you can see that although he's finished all his coursework and may have a straight A average, you see the mountain of Mount Dissertation rises in the distance, and many students have fallen by the wayside and not made it to the goal. So it's a little bit intimidating, but it's meant to represent the fact that the dissertation is indeed something different and requires effort and dedication and may eventually be a challenge that, when you overcome it, will give you a great deal of satisfaction. Now, this is consistent with our approach. When you finish your dissertation, you'll have 5 chapters. Chapter 1 is the introduction, where you talk about the background of the topic. Chapter 2 is your literature review, and we require at least 2 streams of literature. More are sometimes necessary, but at least 2. Then there's the methodology section, where you describe how you're going to prove that your idea is true with empirical data. And then you'll be describing the results, how the tests of your methodology came out, and then finally summarizing the findings. Okay. Now this is pretty standard for dissertations and different types of programs. Some schools use a 6-chapter or a 7-chapter, but 5-chapter introduces the main concepts. So here we use what's called the TSLG model, and it's made up of 2 separate streams of literature. They can come from the same general field, or they could come from different fields. And those 2 streams are drawn together by what we call the literature review. And the literature review is not simply putting everything that's been written about a particular topic in the literature review. It's actually defining and crystallizing and boiling the essence of a particular theory down to something that you're going to use when you try to synthesize the streams together. So some people think, well, I'm just going to write everything that there is that I can find about a particular subject. It has to have a particular point. Those streams are synthesized into what we call a gap and a bridge. The gap is how the 2 theoretical bases can be combined together, okay, so that you're contributing to the literature. This is the prospectus stage. When this has been completed and approved by your advisor, then you can be assigned to a committee or a panel, whatever you want to call it, where some more faculty members join the party. After the prospectus stage, we enter what's called the proposal stage. At that point, then, you're going to convert the bridge and the gap into research questions and testable hypotheses. You're going to look at data collection methods, data analysis methods, where you plan to gather the data. And then when all those parts are put together, you'll have 3 complete chapters. Chapters 1, Introduction. Chapter 2, Literature Review. Chapter 3, Methodology. And then you will defend it. Defend your proposal. Once the proposal has been defended, then you have your methodology and your data collection described. Then you apply to the IRB for approval to move ahead and actually start collecting the data. Once that's been approved, then you go out, and whether you're sending out surveys or you're using experiments or you're doing observations, or even if you're going to secondary databases such as the Census Bureau or the World Bank Bureau of Labor Statistics, you then start to collect the data. When it's collected, then you analyze it, run it through your statistical packages such as SPSS, and then you report the statistical findings and see whether your hypotheses have been accepted or rejected. And finally, based upon those results, convert it back into English and describe what that meant, what this whole process meant, what you contributed to the literature, how you advanced the theories, and also any practical applications that you might propose based upon what you found. That's called the dissertation stage. At the end of this whole thing, now you should have 5 chapters, and you'll be ready to defend. When that's complete and successful, you have finished your dissertation, you've finished your doctoral program. So using an example sometimes helps. So I have a student who's working with 2 theories, one from leadership, and that's something I guess I should mention, is one of your literature bases, one of your streams of literature must come from your concentration area. So if you're in leadership, you have to choose a leadership theory. If you're working in marketing, you're going to choose marketing literature. If you're in international business or global business, you're going to choose something from that area. And then you can use a second stream from almost any area, but it needs to be combined and synthesized with the other stream. So here we're looking at trait-based leadership theory and organizational change theory. Those are then going to be synthesized into the bridge and the gap that organizational theory can be advanced with the synthesis with leadership trait theory. Okay, and then that forms the prospectus. After the prospectus, you get your committee, and then we're going to keep on working and define the research questions more closely. Are certain leadership traits more important to the success of organizational change? And then finally the hypotheses, and eventually how we're going to test this particular question. That's going to be required, determining which variables are going to be measured and what kind of data collection instruments are going to be used. After this has been defended, the proposal has been defended, again we go to the IRB and get approval to start collecting data. Then we start surveying or collecting observations or running experiments. Okay, that's how you're going to reach your target population. And then once all the data is collected, you're going to do the statistical analysis and compare the results to the hypothesis. And finally, you're going to summarize the results and the conclusions. Okay, did you actually find that certain leadership traits are associated with successful organizational change? That was the whole point. To accomplish this, again back to the idea that we're mainly interested in this presentation on the prospectus itself, I developed a template which is the main questions that have to be answered before you can move on. So one question, of course, is what's the topic, and then what's the primary stream of literature and what's the theory behind it. Now you may write one sentence, but eventually you're going to have to show what the literature is, who the authors are, what the literature shows, okay, how it leads to your conclusions for both the primary and secondary streams of literature. So questions 2 and 3 are not going to be simple one-sentence answers. They're going to be pages and pages eventually of literature that shows that you're working in a valid area, that there's existing research that's moved in that direction, that you will be contributing to something that hasn't been done before. So there's a lot of things that have to be answered in your analysis and development of your stream of literature. And then finally, question 4, based upon the streams of literature, what is the research gap that you plan to investigate? And again, referring back to the previous slide, the gap is where the 2 streams are synthesized together, where they are drawn close, and you say that there's an advantage to looking at this particular theory in combination with this other theory. We understand more about what this theory is saying than we did before. Okay, so those are the most important things to do, the number 2, 3, and 4. And then as you move into the proposal stage, you're going to have to get more specific with what specific variables are going to be measured and also what data will be used to test the hypotheses. So then, suppose you're in the position where you're thinking, well, I'm ready to get started. What do I do? First, you have to become a master of the literature in your field. Okay, you need to know the major and minor theories. You need to know the theorists and the researchers. You need to know the evolution of the main research themes, where they started from, what they developed into, what the state of the art is today with regards to these theories. So you need to be aware and have read not only the foundational, the early literature, but you also have to be aware of what people are writing about it now, how they're using these theories in their own research. Then secondly, you need to be able to identify potential research gaps between the established literature and areas where you could do something. Generally in the results or conclusions of the peer-reviewed journal articles that you'll be reading, the authors note where their study ends and what they showed, but where new research could be built upon theirs to find out more things, or prove it more substantially, or to take it in a different direction. And then number 3, as you're reading the literature, many of the things you'll be reading will involve studies where they're proposing a hypothesis or a research question, and they're collecting data, and they're analyzing data, and they're using particular data collection instruments. Well, those studies show you how empirical research is done within your particular field. So it's important to pay attention to those, because you will then kind of learn the method that researchers go through. And this will be the same thing that you'll be trying to do as you move forward with your dissertation process. Okay. So the prospectus template is how you document your work and how you work with your advisor and eventually with your committee. So you work on section 2, which is what's the primary theory, and stream of literature out of your concentration area. You develop the second stream, okay, which again can come from the same area but a different theory, or might come from a different area. For example, a lot of leadership theory is combined with psychology theory. A lot of marketing literature is combined with psychology literature. A lot of global business literature is combined with strategy literature or finance literature. So there's a number of different ways you can do this, and we'll talk more about this in subsequent presentations. Okay. And then finally, what's the research gap? What are you trying to do with your particular work? So these 3 sections, sections 2, 3, and 4, are necessary before you get to move on to get your committee and move on to the next stage. And once these are completed, then you can go back and try to write a definition of, well, so what exactly is the topic going to be? And I don't stress this very much. We don't go into it with a topic and then try to find the theories in the literature that would support that topic. You move from the literature and the synthesis of the literature into coming up with what the new topic will be. So generally, as you learn more about the subject and learn more about what you want to do and learn more about the literature, generally your specific definition of what the topic is will tend to evolve and change over time. So that isn't as important as the sections 2, 3, and 4. Once all that is done and you're moving on more towards the proposal stage, then we're more concerned with the actual data and the independent variables and the instruments you would use to measure them. Okay, these should always be in mind, but you can't start with the variables and tell me I'm going to use these variables, but I don't know what theory I'm using. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so I tell people many times, don't worry too much about variables and instruments and data. Worry about understanding what the literature says, because a lot of the answers to those questions will be found in the literature. You'll be looking at studies that define maybe precisely the variables you want to use, and will show the instruments that measure exactly what you want to measure. So you don't have to make it up, but you do have to be familiar with the literature, especially studies. So here we are again. We're overviewing the whole thing, the prospectus stage, the proposal stage, the dissertation stage, and what happens at each one of these stages. So what happens next? You've done your proposal. Okay. You'll get a committee. And although here at Kaiser we don't usually have committees of 5 or 6 people, we usually have committees of 3 or 4 people. This is a common combination of the people that you'll be dealing with. We have your chairperson, who generally has been the person who's been working with you previously. They know more about what you're thinking about doing and will kind of guide the process. You'll have a methodology person, the statistical guru, who is going to help you understand what you can do with the numbers and how you can collect the data. And then you'll have what's called a subject matter expert, somebody who's going to help you on the literature side. After the committee's assigned, we'll schedule meetings to review the progress. You'll turn in subsequent versions of the prospectus template with more elaboration. I mean, by the time you're finished with that, you may have 20 pages all based around the main questions of the prospectus template. It provides a living document and a working document that keeps everything on track and keeps everything in a standard format, so that the advisor or the chairperson and the rest of the committee can see what you've done and what you need to do next. The committee will make recommendations and suggestions to move ahead. The prospectus will continue to be modified, eventually completed, where all the questions will be answered. And then once the template is finished, then you convert that into the proposal, which is the first 3 chapters of the dissertation. So that's the process. Those are the steps that you go through. The key to success at this stage is to listen to your advisor and your professors. It may appear that they're your adversary and your taskmaster, and I would say yes, we are supposed to be your taskmaster, and we're supposed to provide guidance to you many times by saying you're not there yet. Remember, it's your dissertation. We are part of the process, but it's your dissertation and your ideas, and we have to judge whether they're up to snuff, whether they meet the standards that we've established at the university for doctoral research work. But eventually, we're on your side. We want you to be successful, but we also want you to do the work. And so when we, at the end of the process, sign off and say, yes, you are now a doctor, and other universities and other potential places you would want to use that on your resume, when they look at that, we've got our name on there too. And they say, well, this person and this person all said that this was doctoral quality work. Is that actually true? So when you get advice, it's not like we're trying to make your life hard or difficult. It's like we're trying to keep you on the right path and doing the things that are necessary to complete the dissertation in the most efficient manner possible. So it generally doesn't work to try to change the process or try to bypass the process. This I've developed to make it as clear and simple and straightforward as possible, but you still have to do it. So that's about it. This is, of course, open for questions, so let me know if you have anything you'd like to talk about, if this makes it clearer, or if you have further questions, comments you'd like to make about this. So until next time, goodbye and good luck.